Hello, and welcome to Warhammer 40k's Grim History from the Beyond. I'm Zekthar,
And I'm Yuxin.
and we are the chroniclers of all that was, and all that will be in the 41st millennium. We've seen the rise and fall of many empires. Over the next couple of months, we'll be discussing the tumultuous history of the world of Armageddon.
That's right, Zekthar, and this week we'll be discussing the 57 years in between Gazghkull's first and second invasion of Armageddon.
Indeed. But first, before we get started, we have some more questions from our listeners. Our first batch of questions comes from Hermes, and the first question he asks is, this is an interesting one. What are the known knowns and the unknown knowns that are facing the Imperium? So we tried deciphering this interesting way of stating this question. We figured what you're asking is that what are the things that could harm the Imperium that the Imperium doesn't know about, and the stuff that they do know about? Like, for instance, the known knowns would be like the Great Rift swallowing everything, or the Tyranids, or something along those lines.
Gazghkull's current start.
The unknown knowns would be, I think anyways, like, when's the Silent King waking up all the Necrons? Or what's chasing the Tyranids into the Milky Way system? I think those are a couple things that the Imperium definitely doesn't know about. Or, like Yuxin just said, what Gazghkull is going to do next.
Or any other orcs.
At least the orcs they can kind of manage. Kind of. Because there's this general consensus that they're going to attack humanity. Because that's what they do.
They attack everything. So
yes. So at least they can see that. Now the rest of like I said, the unknown knowns, the big ones to me anyways, are like, when is the Silent King going to wake up all the Necrons? And the other one is what is chasing the hive mind into the Milky Way system? Or you could even make it even simpler than that. When is the hive mind showing up in the Milky Way system? Because it hasn't gotten there yet. We've only seen splinter fleets of the Tyranids. Oh, and probably the last thing anyways is what's Abaddon up to? Because we know he's not done either.
Right.
I mean, last I checked, he was working with the can't remember, the demon prince of the Forge. I can't remember his name.
The demigod.
Yeah. And they were putting together like these different artifacts, and when they get all five of them, it holds the key to something. I don't remember what it does, but
the Arcs of Omen or something like that.
Something like that, and it'll blow up everything. Or I don't know. Nothing bad. That's all I really know about it. I haven't really looked into it too much. But are there any unknown knowns that you can think of there, Yuxin?
Not really, just like you said. Or is there possibly another orc that'll pop up? They'll be just as dangerous or even more dangerous than Gazghkull. We don't know, because they haven't punctured the deepest parts of the orc planets,
Right. Who knows? There might even be some corks left over.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be another unknown known, I guess, anyways. If Trezine's museum ever wakes up all of it at the same time, that would be bad. Or if
he decides to release a couple of things here and there.
Yeah, like some corks, or Ferrus Manus, the clone of Ferrus Manus, I should say. I guess the other unknown, which would be actually more of a good thing, is the Salamanders collecting the rest of Vulcan's gear, because if they can find the rest of it, that means that he comes back, right?
That's
the prophecy, at least, right?
Right.
Well, what's Hermes' next question there, Yuxin?
Hermes' next question is, what are the effects of not having the old ones and the Catan balancing the universe? And as far as we could figure out when we were thinking about is, they never really were to begin with. Neither of them were really, because the universe was already there, for one thing, before the old ones popped up.
Right.
And the Catan were basically just parasites / star vampires that suck the life out of stars.
Right.
So neither one were really balancing anything. In fact, the old ones did kind of create the horror that is the warp.
No, they didn't create the warp.
No, what it is now, though, they did.
Oh, yeah. Let's rephrase that, I guess. They didn't make the warp. They mucked up the warp pretty bad.
Yes. Yes.
It's like poking a bear with a stick. It might be nice and cuddly when it's asleep anyways and in dreamland, but as soon as you start poking it, it wakes up and it's not nearly as happy.
Well, except for in this case, it wasn't not only not happy, it was deformed into something even more horrific than the original fluffy bear that was there before.
Well, it wasn't even still anyways what we picture the warp as today, because humanity hadn't come into being yet either. Humanity, the souls of humanity really drive the warp into this vindictive thing that it is today.
That and the Eldari, but
yeah. The whole waking up Slanesh thing didn't, or theirs didn't help either. But okay, you keep mentioning it as like this is all the old ones' fault. It's like, well, okay, the old ones though were creators. They did a lot of they popped up a whole bunch of different subspecies. They genetically built things on different planets and then just left them to their devices, which is kind of bizarre. But yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't think that they were ever really balancing anything. The only times that we've read that they came into contact was when they end up fighting each other in the war in heaven. So
if you think about it, they kind of mucked up the universe, didn't they?
They did and they didn't. I mean, humanity wouldn't be there if it wasn't for them. So, anyways, Hermes' next question is, when were the orc gods created and were they created by the old ones? That's actually a pretty tough question. Because as we know, the orcs were originally the Quarks, and they were created by the old ones. Now, Gork and Mork, on the other hand, I don't know if the old ones... It's either the old ones created Gork and Mork so that the Quarks could have something they can fuse their powers on, or the Wog energy of the Quarks actually created Gork and Mork. Much more like...
I'm thinking more of the energies.
Hang on a second. Much more like Slanesh was created by the Eldaris, being creeps. The Gork and Mork were created by the Quarks being warlike, and their sentience kind of built these two creatures in the warp.
Yeah.
But what's your 2 cents, Yuxin?
Well, my viewpoint is that they were created by the essences and the effects that the Quarks had psychologically, basically. Their energy ended up creating them.
Psychologically or their psychic powers?
Their psychic powers.
Because energy.
The best we can figure when we've talked about them is the fact that basically the orcs don't fuel the other chaos gods. They end up fueling Gork and Mork, who also in turn give them their Wa energy. So it's like a never-ending cycle.
It's circular. Yeah.
So them creating them kind of makes more sense. But
right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of our answer for that. What's Hermes' next question there, Yuxin? I think he's got 2 more. Yeah, he's got 2 more.
Yeah. The next one was, is there a concern that the Custodes are clones and that is why they don't have free will? Clone Wars, possibly? And whose clones are they? The missing Primarch, maybe? Well, from what we gather, they aren't clones. They are basically noble boys that are broken down into a molecular level and rebuilt.
Just had to bring that back up, didn't you? Yes. The noble children of, or the house.
Sorry, children
of the households of Terra, who offer up their children anyways in the service of the Emperor. And then they are genetically spliced, diced, and thriced until they become custodes, pretty much.
Sorry, what pops in my mind is like they're put in a blender.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then what was left of them was manufactured.
Right.
Into something else.
But real quick, anyways, the missing Primarchs. So 2 of them, anyways, that are missing. There's been very little talk about them. There are a couple of times, anyways, where, like, for instance, I believe it was Sanguinius was walking the halls of the what is it? The Imperial prison. That's the lab the Emperor
Yeah, that's
had.
also the lab. Yeah.
Right. And then they went through this one door, and it was like the original table for the Primarchs, and each person had their seat, and then there were like two spots that had been like literally like scratched out who was supposed to sit there. Another one was there was like a room that had a bunch of statues, and I can't remember which Primarch it was, but he felt very sad when he went in there because there were two obviously ones that were missing. And it was very apparent, anyways, that he knew at least who one of them was. So,
Well, there's one where Magnus the Red, I think, also had a connection with somebody or other that they briefly mention the creation of the two other Primarchs and something to do
right.
with it, but I'm not 100% sure about that.
And quite frankly, anyways, we've done a lot of digging trying to figure out, anyways, who these people were, and we found one of them, but the other guy we're still trying to find. But Hermes' last question, though, is he says, I'm from Albania. Nathaniel Garrow was supposed to be from Old Albion. Are there other figures from Old Earth? Now, I don't know where all the first foundings got their troops from. The origins of every legion, though, did start from Terra. And if you're looking for characters from Old Earth, a large majority of the main characters from Horus Heresy are actually from Terra.
Right.
Now, I don't have time to go through all 18 chapters that we know of today, but I did do some hunting and I found a few of them. And I figured I could just bring up a few anyways each week. And I mean, starting from the top, we've got the Dark Angels. And quite frankly, their legion was just always known as the First. So they kind of had an original name. And their first Grandmaster was from Terra, and his name was Hector Thrain. I don't know a whole lot about him, honestly. But the Emperor's Children, their guy, anyways, is somebody, anyways, is one of your favorites, Fuchsen, that was actually from Terra. And that would be Fabius Bile.
Ah, yes.
You know, you're a good chum. The Emperor's children and their forefathers were gathered from the sons of the aristocracy of Europa, aka Europe. And so if you're looking for, like, for instance, a French aristocrat, snob, anyways, yeah, that's the guy, anyways, that joined the Emperor's children. Pretty much. That's the kind of class they had. Now, the last one that we had, anyways, is, like you said, Nathaniel Garrow was from Old Albion. I hate to tell this to you there, Hermes, but Albion wasn't from Albania. That was actually Great Britain. And their people were known, anyways, well, at least their original name for the Legion was known as the Dusk Raiders. But we've also got, real quick, anyways, there, I talked about them briefly, anyways. The Ahriman came from, and the Thousand Sons came from the Middle East area. And I can't remember, I think they were just, I don't remember what they were originally called, but Thousand Sons works still for me. And then and then Karn, I believe, was also, Karn was also from Terra. And their name, though, if I recall right, anyways, it was something dogs, devil dogs or something. I can't remember what they call them. I'll look it up anyways, and I'll get back to you guys on that next week. But we do actually have one last question, and this one comes from a new person, Nathaniel T, 1984. And he asked, and I kind of actually like this question, or he's got a couple of them. He says, do you ever wonder if humanity never fell from grace? For example, what if the Horus heresy never occurred, and the Emperor didn't mistreat his sons, or Horus stayed loyal to the Emperor? Or two, what if the Age of Strife never occurred? What if humanity controlled AI properly so that they may expand beyond the stars and conquer past the Milky Way system? So let's start with the first one. If the Horus heresy never took place, then we could officially say, Yuxin, that the Golden Throne would actually have been completed, correct?
Yes, possibly. Yes. We'll just say yes.
Okay. which means anyways that they would no longer be using the warp anyways for interstellar travel. The Emperor would surprise Magnus's birthday by shoving him into the Golden Throne. He'd be stuck there forever. Happy birthday, Magnus. He'd probably use Lionel Johnson to pretty much murder the rest of the Space Marines when they were done conquering the galaxy, along with Ferrus Manus's, or not Ferrus Manus, Lehman Russ's guys. And then the question of what he would do with the rest of the Primarchs anyways, he would just use them as tools pretty much. And humanity would...
Lehman Russ and his were considered the executioners, so why would they technically be one of the ones to be wiped out? That's one of my questions.
Because the thought process is that Lionel Johnson and the first company of Space Marines, they were designed to actually kill other Space Marines. That's the rumor behind it. So the concept is that after they conquered the galaxy, he would use that legion to crush everybody else. That's the thought process behind it. I don't know how accurate that'd be. And quite frankly, I don't know what he'd end up doing anyways with all the Primarchs either. I mean, I'm sure that the other Primarchs would not be like, sure, go for it. You know? Go ahead and murder all of my sons.
Funny how that would happen with Alpharius and Omegon. That'd be really weird. It's like, yes, we have taken care of all of Alpha Legion, but have you?
Have you? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, there was that one unusually tall guy, a little while back.
But that's my kind of 2 cents on it. I don't think humanity even would really actually expand past the Milky Way system. I think that they would just start to advance anyways technologically, but they would always be hampered by the Emperor. Yeah. And the Emperor, I think, would rule over humanity for eternity then, pretty much. Which you can take that or leave it any way you want. But what do you think, Yuxin?
I agree pretty much entirely with what you said. The whole aspect of, well, there could have possibly been an entirely different war caused by the fact if he tried to wipe out the Space Marines, because, I'm sure several of the Primarchs would be like, no. But if everything went to plan, I do think that the Emperor would want to stay in control the entire time.
Right.
Be that either by hindering advancements or finding certain ways to eliminate things that would help create independence from him.
Right. And to answer the second question, if the Age of Strife had never occurred, we were talking about this yesterday. I hate to say this, but the Emperor, I think, the Emperor would have found a way anyways to trip up humanity so that he could become their savior, pretty much. That's my thought process.
Back to the whole, I'm not a god, I just use godlike powers thing.
I'm not a god, but I will be in charge of
everything.
And everything.
So you are playing God. No, I'm not.
I think anyways, he would eventually found a way anyways to kick humanity in the balls and just, step on them and move on. So I think that's honestly one of the main reasons why. I know that it's always said anyways, the reason why he wanted to get away from AI was because of what happened in the Age of Strife and the robots rising up against humanity. And part of me thinks, okay, yeah, he's got a good point there anyways, but nobody really knows why the AI all of a sudden went nutso, which, by the way, there was a guy back then anyways that probably had something to do with that, in my humble opinion, known as the Big E. Remember what I said earlier anyways about kicking humanity in the balls? Yeah, that I could definitely see him anyways doing something with the AI. And secondly,
or the warp for that matter. But anyways.
Yeah, both things. And secondly, anyways, if you start using an AI program and system anyways, that's something that can compete against him. So if you can't actually use AI, and that's one of the things he always said anyways, like, you can't use an AI system, even though the Mechanicus kind of does occasionally. It's just one less thing anyways he has to worry about somebody anyways trying to take over or take his power. So, I mean, that's my thought process. I know a lot of people would think anyways, there's kind of that there would be like this rosy end and humanity would become great and powerful and they'd move on from the Milky Way system. I just think anyways that the Emperor is too much of a crutch.
Well, that plus humanity itself, even left to its own devices, will never stay at peace.
Right. I mean, if you look at Terran 42 today, anyways,
War has never ended. Period.
There's a reason why Khorne's the most. There's a reason why Khorne's the most powerful Chaos God. People just can't stop.
Yeah.
He's always going to have people killing each other. It's just the way it works. But thank you all for your questions. Oh, sorry. What did you think, anyways, if the Age of Strife had never occurred?
I think that there would be problems concerning the fact that more and more people would want to act independently of the Imperium, which would cause conflict.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, especially for the Big E. They should really just call him the Big D. But anyways, thank you guys for your questions. But let's get on to what is Gazghkull doing now that he got the crap kicked out of him in Armageddon there, Yuxin?
Well, after leaving Armageddon, Gazghkull was not idle. He did not look upon that campaign as a defeat, but more as a necessary stumble that was part of a larger journey. For a master plan had been revealed to Gazghkull by Gork and Mork. Now, the warlord saw clearly that Armageddon was not the end. It was only the beginning.
I didn't fall. I didn't trip. I fell with style.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
If the Imperium made one huge mistake following the Second War for Armageddon, it was in not immediately pursuing Gazghkull with all their strength and available resources. Now, after losing a major battle, orcs will often depose their failed leader, the first step on the downward spiral to true anarchy. It is true that early on after his escape, Gazghkull did have to remind some tribes of his greatness by defeating his challengers in horrific fashion. However, the warlord regained his followers' full support, not just with his triumphal acts of violence, but through his words. What the orc gods had revealed to Gazghkull, or rather, what Gazghkull said they revealed to him, was that in order to destroy your foe, you must first know him. To the orcs, such an idea was both radical and profound. This meant that, for Gazghkull, the whole invasion of Armageddon was merely a way to test the waters. An experiment to learn how the Imperium would react against a massive invasion. The swift space marine strikes and the grinding attrition of the human warriors had indeed been eye-openers to an orc from the isolated world of Urk. Now, Gazghkull had learned what he needed to know about the Imperium's strategies. It was time to regroup, to gather new armies to rebuild and restore the war till it had enough strength to menace entire star systems. Most of Gazghkull's forces had been left on Armageddon. Only a core of his most trusted mobs were with Gazghkull when he landed on the world of Golgotha. In ages past, the Golgotha subsector had been heavily colonized by mankind, but since then it had passed through the grasp of various races until it was ultimately conquered by the orcs. That war, however, had run out of impetus long ago, leaving behind many disparate and interfeuding tribes. Using Golgotha as his forward operating base, or FOB for short, Gazghkull began to gather the orcs from the sector to his cause. Just like on Urk, Gazghkull began subjugating the Greenskins. At first he clubbed bosses and gained new mobs one at a time, but news travels fast when the orcs begin to get excited. Whether it was due to the tremendous power of his adamantium skull headbutts, or the orcish wisdom he received from his visions from Gork and Mork, soon whole tribes were seeking out this new warlord. In the 5 solar decades that followed the Second War for Armageddon, Gazghkull carried on uninterrupted with his divinely inspired plan. Having learnt all he needed to know about Imperial tactics and strategy, he began developing the tactics that he felt would lead to his enemy's ultimate defeat. As he did not want to draw attention to himself, these experiments were carried out on a much smaller stage than the invasion of Armageddon. From 945 to 959.M41, the Imperium received numerous reports of small orc raids and attacks against Imperial bases and outposts that were led by Gazghkull Threka personally. In 962.M41, an Imperial military base on the world of Buka 3 was destroyed by missiles fired from an orc base hidden within an asteroid. The asteroid entered the star system from deep space, bypassed all the Imperial sensors because of its seemingly inert nature, before unleashing its potent missiles at the unsuspecting outpost.
Pardon me, Yuxin, but so here's my question about that, I guess. Did they figure out a way to propel the asteroid in from a distant area, or do you think that they actually found the trajectory, they landed on it, put a bunch of missile silos on it, and then jetted off? I can see orcs doing both of them, but what do you think they did?
I'm thinking more of, since it was supposedly inert, maybe they just stuffed a whole bunch of people on there.
So they figured out anyways where the asteroid was going. They're like, oh, sweet, it's going to go next to Buka 3, and then put a bunch of missile
it looks
silos
like it's
on
heading that direction.
Okay.
we think it's heading that direction. Let's test this out.
So what you're saying is that
who cares? I mean, it's orc logic. So if it isn't, who cares?
They'll eventually find another planet that they can shoot.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you telling me anyways that there's a bunch of these asteroids that are just kind of floating through space that eventually will get close enough to a planet and somebody will just start firing?
Maybe.
Well, that'll be interesting.
That would be a new unknown known, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there you go. There you go, Hermes.
Randomly, they find out that there's massive amounts of asteroid fields that actually randomly have orcs on them.
Yeah. It'll be a new xenospecies. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, in 932.M41, the Imperial Agro world of Chigon 17 was overrun by a huge force of orcs, also allegedly under war boss Gazghkull's direct command, despite the fact that Chigon's Imperial Guard defenders were equipped with tanks and other armored vehicles. They were decisively beaten by the orcs in a lengthy guerrilla campaign, which rendered the powerful but stacked Imperial defenses wholly useless. In 986.M41, the Imperial Navy battlecruiser Radiant Way and its escorts were lost with all hands in an attack by orc pirates, again led by Gazghkull. The Imperium responded in force, but discovered that all signs of the orc presence had simply disappeared by the time they arrived in that region of space. But little did Gazghkull know he was being hunted by a familiar foe.
Indeed, brother. And that foe would be none other than Commissar Sebastian Yarrick. Now, last week, if you recall, Yarrick was one of the few survivors of the final battle for Hades Hive. And it took many solar months for him to recover from the injuries he sustained during that final assault. After his recovery, and now that the danger had passed, he accepted nominal retirement, along with a training post on Armageddon. Okay, so real quick here. So he got in his retirement a training post? Am I getting that right? That didn't sound like really retirement.
Well, retirement from being a commissar.
Ah.
Kane kind of did sort of the same thing, actually.
So he like continued on as a teacher, or do you think it was more along the lines that he like owned the training facility and he was just like the grumpy old man that owned it that would just yell at the troops to get off my lawn?
No, more like, you're doing that wrong. Get it right. Are you going to show us? No, I'm retired.
Get off my lawn.
I don't show you anything.
What do you do about it, old man? Shoots him with his bail eye.
Medic! Sorry.
Medic!
What popped in my head was the Territory 2 movie Starship Troopers, where they train those people. He's like, what are we going to use a knife for? We can impair the person's limb. They cannot fight back. Medic!
They cannot push a button if you've disabled his hand. Medic! Either that or his house, anyways, is literally part of the obstacle course. So when they run through the obstacle course, He's just sitting there on his rocking chair with his laser eye, trying to shoot him as they go by, through the obstacles. Anyways, however, when he learned that not only had Gazghkull escaped Armageddon, but was no doubt forming another Woog, proved too much of a distraction. And only solar months later, he reported back for active duty, vowing that he would not rest until the day Gazghkull Mag Uruk-Thraka was hunted down and killed. Now, Yarrick attempted to follow through on his oath and set off in pursuit of his nemesis in a game of cat and mouse that lasted for nearly 10 standard years. Gazghkull fled before Yarrick and protected what remained of his forces, only committing to rearguard action when necessary. Now, Yarrick attempted to break the deadlock by forcing his opponent down on the once imperial planet of Golgotha.
Okay, hold on half a second. This has been bugging me.
Sure, but what would that be?
I know I mentioned before that it was under orc control, and it's still been bugging me, but isn't Golgotha the planet the Squats and or the Voton came from with Horse to help on Armageddon?
Yep.
Well, what happened to them?
According to my research, there's a huge gap between point A, the planet being run by Squats, to B, Golgotha being a orc world. Yet after some digging, I came across some redacted Ordo Xenos files that suggested that the Squats and or Voton joined forces with Yarrick, which I will get to here in a minute. If you travel to Golgotha today, in fact, and avoid the mini greenskins, you'll actually find some old ruins of the alien species are still there. But getting back to Yarrick, at first it appeared that Yarrick would finally triumph, as Gazghkull at last committed his forces to open battle. But the tables were turned when it became clear Golgotha was a trap. The moment Gazghkull and his Goths engaged, a second lesser Woog of orcs hit the humans from behind, having patiently laid in wait for just that moment. A space Hulk then emerged from behind Golgotha's moon to drive off the Imperial Navy. Gazghkull and his greenskins devastated the Imperial defenders with such ferocity that even the Commissar himself could not stand against it. Despite a ferocious defense and incredible feats of valor, the humans were exterminated to a man, and only Yarrick remained alive atop his Baneblade fortress of arrogance. Gazghkull wanted to confront Yarrick himself, but when he found the elderly Commissar making a last stand at the wreck of his Baneblade, which he had deliberately rammed into one of the Gargants, Gazghkull saw an opportunity to finally display his dominance over the other greenskins, and he ordered the human captured instead. Now, Gazghkull wanted to use Yarrick to assert his dominance over the other orcs, and to prove he understood how humans worked. When the Commissar's muddled brain came to, he found himself on one of the orc space hulks. As his brain began to clear, he realized that he was without his bionic claw and bale eye, and hanging in chains above a pit. Gazghkull, who was watching, waited for Yarrick to retain full consciousness before sending him plummeting down the chute to the laughter of the other orcs present. Landing amongst the refuse of the hulk, Yarrick was forced to fend for himself amongst the many squeaks scavenging amongst the rubbish. Gazghkull then proclaimed that the human would escape. The other orcs were doubtful, since none of them had ever managed to survive the ordeal, but Yarrick would indeed resurface a few solar days later. Nobody was more surprised than Yarrick to find Gazghkull waiting for him, as if the war boss had known all along the human would make it out alive. Gazghkull then ordered Yarrick thrown amongst the other human slave prisoners on the Space Hulk, telling his boys that the human would find a way to strike back and kill them all. True enough, Yarrick went to work, quickly assessing this new situation. Yarrick set about organizing a revolt amongst the human slaves. Since the human work crews were used haphazardly by the orcs as a slave detail, they managed to crudely map a large part of the Hulk in the course of their labors. Yarrick wanted to attack a large structure shaped like an orc head, believing it to be the temple to the orc gods, and that Gazghkull would be there. But the other prisoners convinced him to try to escape and warn the Imperium instead. Yarrick reluctantly agreed, and when the time came, one of the work gangs sabotaged a large orcish ammunition dump, with Yarrick and a dozen other slaves slipping away in the confusion. Alas, escape would prove impossible, for their intended rescue vehicle was in the process of being customized by the Space Hulk's mech boys, leaving the humans stranded on the Hulk. Faced with discovery, the pilot amongst the group sacrificed himself and started the altered spacecraft up anyways, which resulted in another massive explosion and diversion for Yarrick. Left with no other choice, the remaining humans made for the Hulk's temple, which was actually the Space Hulk's bridge, which each member of the escapees in turn sacrificing themselves to give Yarrick a chance to reach the top of the structure and his hated foe. Yet, at the last, Yarrick would be denied. When he reached the bridge, he found only several mechs manning the station, whom he quickly dispatched. With the orcs in hot pursuit, Yarrick opted for a last gamble, activating all the systems of the Space Hulk at once in the hope of making it tear itself apart due to the stress of such uncoordinated forces. As he gazed out of the bridge's eyes, Yarrick saw massive devastation erupt alongside one side of the Space Hulk and committed his soul to the Emperor as it raced towards his position. This time, the other orcs were convinced that Gazghkull could indeed predict the humans' behavior, and Gazghkull ordered Mad Doc Grotstick to return the humans' bionics. Days later, Yarrick once again regained consciousness. He stood up, astonished and even more amazed that his bionics had been returned to him while he slept. Exiting the room, he was greeted by hundreds of orcs who started to cheer him on while parting away through their ranks. Bewildered, the Commissar followed his escort of greenskins to the closed launch bay, where Gazghkull waited for him in front of an intact shuttlecraft. Yarrick expected to be forced to fight, but Gazghkull merely stepped out of the way, stating to Yarrick that it had been a good fight, and that he should now get back to Armageddon and prepare for the orcs' return, where they would soon be launching yet another battle to reclaim Armageddon. Now, real quick, before we discuss this interesting time in both Yarrick and Gazghkull's life, I have an interesting excerpt here from the scribe David Annandale, who chronicled Yarrick's biography. And he wrote, "The door opened. I stopped. Beyond it, orcs lined both sides of the corridor. They had been watching for me. The moment I appeared, they roared their approval. They did not attack. They simply stood, clashed guns against blades, and hooted brute enthusiasm. I had been subjected to too many celebratory parades on Armageddon not to recognize one when it confronted me. I went numb from the unreality before me. Stepped forward, though. I had no choice. I walked. It was the most obscene victory march of my life. I moved through corridor, hold, and bay, and the massed ranks of greenskins hailed my passage. I saw the evidence of the destruction I had caused around every bend. Scorch marks, patched ruptures, buckled flooring, collapsed ceilings. But it hadn't been enough. Not nearly enough. Only enough for this thing. At length, I arrived at the launch bay. There was a ship on the pad before the door. It was human. Small and system shuttle. It was not built for long voyages. No matter, as long as its Vox system was still operative. I knew that it would be. Gazghkull Mag Urk Thraka awaited me beside the ship's access ramp. I did not let my confusion or the sense that I had slipped into an endless waking nightmare slow my stride. I did not hesitate as I strode towards the monster. I stopped before him. I met his gaze with a cold hatred of my soul. He radiated delight. Then he leaned forward, a colossal of arm and bestial strength. Our faces were mere centimeters apart. My soul bears many scars from the days and months of my defeat in captivity. But there is one memory that, above all others, haunts me. By day, it is a goad to action. By night, it murders sleep. The proof that there could hardly be a more terrible threat to the Imperium than this orc. Thraka spoke to me, not in Orcish, not even in Low Gothic, in High Gothic. "A great fight," he said. He extended a huge clawed finger and tapped me once on the chest. "Me best enemy." He stepped aside and gestured to the ramp. "Go to Armageddon. Make ready for the greatest fight." I entered the ship, my being marked by words whose full measure of horror lay not in their content, but in the fact of their existence. Well, brother, what do you think of the Battle of Golgotha?
It's interesting how Gazghkull allowed Yarrick to do what he did for so long before putting him on the thing. I mean, I understand, proving that, yes, I can understand them and I can show you guys I can understand what will happen. But at the same time,
Well, one of the things that I find interesting is, quite frankly, anyways, the fact that he can speak High Gothic. There's not even like a whole lot of people that can do that. So it shows, anyways, that not only, I mean, it's one of those things that I always find interesting about orcs is that the bigger they get, it's not just, anyways, they get smarter.
yeah,
Which just is, it's bizarre to me, anyways. So just the concept, anyways, that he's figuring all this out, and the way that he just so eloquently set up a trap for Yarrick. I mean, orcs aren't normally very good at traps. Let's put it that way. Orcs are pretty simple normally.
Well,
it's like
to
face
be
front
more
towards enemy and
specific,
charge.
especially Goths.
Right. Okay, yeah, good point. I mean, like, for instance, that was something you would think, anyways, a battle axe would do, or blood axe would do. But not necessarily, anyways, a Goth. Goth is very much like I just said, anyways, point towards enemy and then tell him to go. And, yeah. So, to me, it's fairly interesting, anyways, that he's this intelligent and he's doing a pretty good job at this point.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like you said, anyways, normally orc chieftains will go until they lose. And then when they lose, anyways, it's like their whole army runs out of steam and they're just done. So that I also find kind of interesting. But does Gazghkull got anything else he's doing before he runs back to Armageddon?
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, what else is he up to?
Well, just before the outbreak of the Third War for Armageddon, Gazghkull allied with the Bad Moon's orc warlord, Nazdrag Ug Erdgrub, to launch an assault on the imperial world of Pesina 4. Well, typical Bad Moon warlords, Nazdrag is rich, ostentatious, and overindulgent. He loves nothing better than to take his warband raiding, both to garner extra wealth and prove how well equipped his boys are. In one way, however, Nazdrag is anything but ordinary, for he is easily the most cunning and intelligent battlefield commander the Bad Moons have ever had. An exception amongst the brutish orcs, Nazdrag demonstrates a measure of both intelligence and patience, as he speaks excellent Imperial Gothic, understands the carrot and stick approach of rewards and punishment utilized by orc runt herds to boost the productivity of his hapless human and Gretchen slaves. Fortunately for the Imperium, Nazdrag is only interested in wealth, for if he chose to work up the energy to lead a war, there is no doubt that he would be an adversary every bit as dangerous as Gazghkull Mag Uruk Threka. Though we have talked about Nazdrag multiple times, Sektar, I specifically talked about him in our Vox about notable orcs called The Orcs' Greatest Champions, and you discussed him in the Siege of Medusa series. But, one thing that has always bugged me.
No. What?
What exactly happened on Pesina 4?
I know what you mean. I mean, like I said, I've done some research on him too, but every place I look up, it just simply says, the orcs used a previously unknown form of teleportation technology that let them maneuver their troops directly onto the planet from the space hulk, located a large distance away from the planet. The Imperial garrison was taken completely by surprise, and only the presence of the Space Marines from the Dark Angels chapter saved Pesina from being overrun by the Greenskins. End quote.
Exactly. But after much research, I actually found some more information on the subject, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, not at all. I've been looking for this information for years. So, well, what'd you find?
Well, to find this info, I found out that the commander of the Dark Angels was a fellow by the name of Belial. And despite suffering near-terminal injuries, he went on to command a successful holding action against the orc invaders, saving the planetary capital of Cadillus Harbor from repeated attacks. Gazghkull himself led the assault on the plasma reactor of Cadillus Harbor, thinking to use it to power the orcs' teleporters. Master Belial led a counterattack that sent the orcs reeling, and it seemed that the Space Marines would prevail. But it was then that Gazghkull himself attacked Belial and almost killed him. The plasma reactor fell to the greenskins soon afterwards. With the orcs' teleporters now fully operational, massive orc reinforcements flooded onto Pacina 4. The wounded Belial continued to lead the Dark Angels, who were now outnumbered several thousand to one. The battle for Pacina 4 raged for another 2 solar weeks until the remainder of the Dark Angels arrived and drove off the orc horde. Thanks to the actions of Master Belial and his small force, Pacina 4 was saved from the Greenskins' assault, and Gazghkull's ambitions were held in check, for a time at least, until he descended upon the Armageddon system. However, this defeat proved to be of little consequence for Gazghkull, as the completion of his new teleporter meant that he was finally ready to unleash his full force against the Imperium. As a side note, the orc genius who created the teleporter was later dubbed Archimedes by the Imperium. Also, as a side note, he was, I believe, originally one of Nazdreg's mechs, but somehow
I don't
there's
think
some sort of negotiation trade or something that occurred.
Yeah, if I recall right, when we did the orcs, when we covered the orcs, I think we found that, but I don't this time anyways, I don't remember it popping up, but
Yeah, if I remember right, what ended up happening was basically there's some sort of trade. They don't specifically say what.
right.
It wasn't a threat. It was an actual trade. It was
Right.
like, sure, I'll lend you my mech, basically. And unfortunately for the Imperium,
It was Archimedes.
yeah, it was Archimedes. Anyways, getting back on topic. After more than 50 years, Gazghkull and his orcs intended to have their revenge.
Now, before we take off, there is one more interesting action that took place before the Third War of Armageddon. And this has to do with, yet again, Yarrick. Now, after Yarrick left the Space Hulk orbiting Golgotha in the shuttlecraft, he soon returned with a force drawn from the ranks of the Adeptus Mechanicus, military forces, and a massive weapon known as the Ordinatus Golgotha, and routed the orcs from the world. Gazghkull again escaped to fight another day, and Golgotha would eventually be reclaimed by the orcs soon before the start of the Third War for Armageddon. Now, real quick, the reason he came back wasn't just anyways because he couldn't gather a big enough force anyways to try to kill Gazghkull, but he did want to go back for one very important thing. That happened to be for his Baneblade, which they did recover, which was kind of a good thing. And if I recall right, there's a book on that, or is it a short story?
It's a book, and I believe it's called Gunheads.
So that sounds interesting. Who scribed it?
It was scribed by somebody by the name of Steve Parker. And he covers the events of Yarrick's. He himself didn't go there to get the Baneblade. He requested it to be grabbed by Acadian army group, which was unfortunately led by one of those Lord Generals that we don't care for. The type, I mean, that we don't care for that go, well, I need glory, so screw the little man.
Right.
And so basically they were sent on pretty much a suicide mission, and the majority of them did get wiped out.
But they did end up getting the Baneblade back, right?
Yeah. And no, yeah. The commanding officer was stupid, to say the least.
Now, so the other thing I wanted to mention, though, one of the things the Adeptus Mechanicus brought with them, like I said anyways, was this giant Ordinatus Golgotha. Now, this weapon, anyways, is actually fairly interesting. It is run by a sect of the Mechanicus known as the Centurio Ordinatus. And their sole purpose is that they truck around like giant weapons of destruction. And they do all sorts of different things, but they're all pretty much, every weapon is kind of unique in of itself. But this one, the Golgotha one in particular.
Constructed from squat tech.
That's what I thought you might find interesting anyways. So that when they went back to Golgotha, it didn't end up going very well. And the early battles went badly for the Imperium as the sheer size of the orc overwhelmed them time and time again. In an attempt to smash the massive orc mobs, Ordanitus Golgotha was constructed in the recaptured strongholds of the squats. So they probably used some squat technology there. Golgotha's terrifying Hellfire missiles devastated the orcs, slaying thousands over the course of a week. Orcs were routed from the squat homeworld, and since then, Ordanitus Golgotha has always been in the forefront of any battle against enemies who have a strong numerical advantage. I'll have a picture of this too. Hellfire missiles, by the way, they're not like they are in Terran 42.
Yeah.
What it is that it's got a compound of a potent acidic or viral compound developed by the Adeptus Mechanicus. It burns through armor and sears flesh, usually leaving the few who survive hideously scarred and crippled. It is a matter of opinion whether or not it is better to die from a Hellfire attack or to survive. Ordanitus Golgotha carries 6 Hellfire missiles and can only fire 1 or 2 per hour. A Hellfire missile has multiple warheads, allowing it to completely devastate a wide area. In addition, the extensive scanning equipment aboard Ordanitus Golgotha allows it to fire with unerring accuracy. The Hellfire missiles can be fired at any point on the battlefield, even at targets that are out of line of sight with no chance of scattering. Unlike normal indirect barrages, there is no need for friendly troops to spot for the accurate launch of a Hellfire missile. Enemy units attacked by this horrendous weapon may be panicked by the agonizing screams of their comrades as their flesh burns away and their bones melt.
So here's the question.
Yes?
If they used this to clear out Golgotha, why is Golgotha still under orc control?
I don't think they actually... Well, they did clear out Golgotha for a time. They kicked all the orcs off, they got the Baneblade, they left, and then all the orcs came back.
Well, they didn't get the Baneblade, though.
They didn't get the Baneblade? I thought they did.
No. Because see, what happened was they sent these other people for Operation Thunderstorm, was what it's called. And it's just like 30,000 of them were sent.
Oh. Well, let's see here. What do my notes say again? Well, okay, so this says, anyways, after they had this from Golgotha, they routed the orcs from the world. Gazghkull again escaped to fight another day, and Golgotha would eventually be reclaimed by the orcs soon before the start of the Third War of Armageddon. So they beat off the orcs.
What we get from this is that they created this thing, they wiped out a whole bunch of orcs off the planet. Then I guess they had to leave.
I'm guessing what it was is that they had just enough strength to beat back the orcs, and they're like, we better get out of here before they come back.
And take this thing with us.
Yes. Yarrick was probably about, well, what about my Beyblade? No. We don't know where it is.
So we'll send these hapless 30,000 people.
We'll leave these Cadians here. They'll take care of it. The rest of us were taking off. All right, but before we take off, what do you think of Gazghkull's dealings in between the wars? Do you think he did a lot with his time? What do you think, anyways, of the setup here?
I think he did very well for himself. I also think one of his smart decisions was to work with and not try to take control of Nazdrag. I think just working with them by itself would have been a great learning experience, since he obviously had definitely different tactics than Gazghkull did at the time. I have no doubt whatsoever.
Nazdrag, to me, anyways. Well, first off, anyways, just the whole concept, anyways, that he didn't have him, anyways, form into his Wog, Gazghkull, which shows, anyways, there was a certain amount of respect, anyways, from Nazdrag. Because if there wasn't, anyways, he would have just conquered him. Like, that's normally what orcs do.
Yeah.
So to actually have an honest to goodness trade between the two and they work together is fairly interesting. I know you're
saw more as the wizened veteran, because I'm guessing Nazdrag's older than Gazghkull is.
We don't know that.
Yeah, but
because we don't know where Nazdrag comes from. He just randomly pops up in Imperial records.
Yeah.
Like most orcs do.
Because
the fact that we know that how Gazghkull started is shocking enough. But I've been more along the lines, anyways, that they just look at warfare differently. Yeah. Nazdrag looks at warfare completely differently than any other orc that I've ever researched. He's more human than with his strategies than he is orcish, which is bizarre.
Well, like we've talked about before, one of the things that makes him also unique is he actually utilizes the carrot and the stick approach when it comes to using humans
Right.
instead of the stick and bigger stick approach.
I mean,
I'll hit you, so work. If you don't work, I'll hit you even harder.
How he escaped Medusa 5 before it got exploded by the warp was that he captured he captured a couple of human transport ships, kept the people alive on them. Well, not all of them, but a majority of them on there anyways. And then had them anyways say that they were coming aboard, the battle cruisers that were above them. They gave all their clearances so that when they landed, all the orcs popped out of them and then took the battleships. That's something an orc really does. We were talking about anyways, orcs and traps and such. Yeah, Nazdrag anyways is kind of a king of that. He's also bizarre.
Bad moon. That's the other thing. He's a bad moon, which makes it even more weird.
I was going to say
moons, the more aspect that you think of when you think of bad moons is one thing. They have a lot of teeth,
right?
And they have basically. They're the wealthiest, so they have like all of the. I think the only other people that may have more weaponry and stuff would be the Gazghkulls, but that's just because they nick things.
They steal it all,
and they're the pillagers. They generally are the ones that get to places first and ransack them, or just steal from other clans.
Right.
But next to them, the one that have probably the most DACA and weaponry and stuff is Bad Moons. That's what they're known for.
Well, it's not only that he's a bad moon, he's also on top of that, he's a freebooter.
No, he is not a freebooter.
Well, but he's a pirate. Isn't that the same thing?
No.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, freebooters in comparison to just freebooters abandon their clans and their clan cultures.
Oh, okay. So it's not like the culture of speed where you can be part of the culture of speed, but you're still a bad moon or a blood axe or whatever. If you're a freebooter, you're no longer a blood moon. You are a freebooter.
Yeah.
So it's also it's kind of its own clan-ish.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay. So you can be a pirate, but not a freebooter. But if you're a freebooter, you have to be a pirate.
Yes,
or at least, or at least piratically themed.
Yeah, because Wurtsnaga, you don't really think of him as a pirate, but he's.
Well, I'm sure he's got a parrot squig, or what do they call them? Squig hawk, or squidgen?
Maybe
a squidgen.
Nah, I don't think he has a squidgen.
Oh, come on! The squidgens are awesome, legendary amongst the freebooters. For those who are wondering what we're talking about and didn't listen to our boxes on orcs and squigs, the squidgen is a bird-like squig that's about the size of a pigeon. That are used for sending messages.
In other words, it is the squig version of a carrier pigeon.
Correct.
A squidgen.
Yes. And on that note, we are out of time for today. Join us next week as we discuss the Third War of Armageddon. Now, because there's so much that takes place in the Third War of Armageddon, we're going to split that into 2 boxes. Not only that, but I'm probably going to be doing a couple bonus boxes on the Celestial Lions. And by the way, Andarchy, yes, we will be talking about Grimaldus and your favorite Space Legion. Well, not Legion, I guess, chapter. The Black Templars. Quite a bit in the upcoming weeks.
Fantastic. But if you enjoyed our little show, could you please be so kind as to push that subscribe, like, or follow button? And if you wish to help us expand our work on 40k lore, by all means, support us by joining our membership program on our YouTube channel, Tales of Asharaka.
Indeed. And most importantly, have a great day. And as always, until next time, this is Eklar
and Yuxa
signing off.